Is it just me, or do you find choosing a type of milk at the store really confusing? There's all different sorts of labels. There's grass-fed, pasture-raised, might even say on pasture, or organic, and it's hard to know what each one meant. I never really knew what they meant. I just knew, like, okay, it sounds good that it's grass-fed or that it says grass milk on the label. But today we're going to break down the three major labels, so then that way you know what they mean and which ones may or may not have the standards that you might want. Welcome to MrsCrunchy, where we discuss natural living in a modern world. Let's start by breaking down three of the major labels that you're going to see at the store. There's grass-fed, there's pasture-raised, and organic. So first, starting off with grass-fed. This refers to what the cow is being fed in its diet. And just because it says grass-fed doesn't mean that the cow is only eating grass or hay. Just a side note here, this is something that might seem really obvious to some of you that have been raised around cows or agriculture, but hay is actually dried grass. Grass-fed can include hay as well. From what I was reading, cows can actually be fed only 50% grass and still be considered grass-fed when it comes to labels. So if you're interested in having milk that is solely from cows that solely feed on grass, then you'll want to look for a label from the AGA, which is the American Grass-Fed Association. They have higher standards, and one of them is that the cows can only eat grass. Now, whether or not this is important to you is going to be something that you'll have to decide. So, for example, when I was learning about steaks, I thought, okay, you only want grass-fed and finished steaks, because a lot of times, and same thing with cows that are produced for milk too, is that they could be fed grass for most of their lives, and then they might send them to a feedlot. Sometimes they're really overcrowded too, to receive grain right before slaughter. There are some people that are a fan of being grain-fed at the end because they say it produces a better tasting steak. I guess it has a higher fat content to it. So it just depends on what's important to you. And I know that sometimes there will be periods of, let's say, flood or drought, and so it might be difficult and or very costly to keep that cow only on grass. So there are a lot of ethical farmers out there who might supplement their cow's diet with grain for a small portion of the year. Not the whole year, and it doesn't compose most of their diet, but it might be fed a small percentage of grain, something like corn or barley. Now, when it comes to nutrition, there are benefits from being 100% grass-fed versus even 50% grass-fed. And the main difference is in its fatty acid profile. So when they compared cows that were exclusively grass-fed versus cows that were even 50% grass-fed, what they found is that there's higher levels of omega-3. And I don't want to veer too much off course in this video, but I've done a video on seed oils, and basically they're saying that a lot of us these days through our modern diets are consuming too many omega-6s in ratio to omega-3s, even though you need both, but it's just the ratios are being thrown off. So exclusively grass-fed cows seem to have a higher omega-3 level and lower levels of omega-6. All right, let's move on to our second label, which is pasture-raised. So pasture-raised, if grass-fed means it's referring to what the cows are being fed, then pasture-raised refers more to where the cows are spending their time. But by default, that also includes what they're eating. So I will explain this. Pasture-raised means that the cows are spending their time in pasture where they normally are. And cows are designed to eat grass. Their digestive systems are designed for that. And they're also designed to be out grazing. And so the more that we can keep with their natural lifestyle, the better it's going to be for them and any products that they produce. So the tricky part with pasture-raised is that there's no definitive standard. There's no certain amount of hours that a cow has to be out on pasture in order to be considered pasture-raised by any of the national organizations here, from what I could find. It simply means that the cows have access to pasture. And again, similar like I touched upon when we were speaking about grass-fed, there are factors that are uncontrollable that can affect this. So for example, the weather, because grass needs the sun to grow. So in areas or certain years where you're not receiving as much sunlight, you're not going to have as much grass. Again, there could be something like a flood, something weather related, that will prevent the cows from being out on pasture as much. Now naturally, if the cows are spending a lot of time in pasture, they're going to be grazing. So they're going to be eating some grass and maybe legumes that are growing out in the fields wherever they're grazing. So it does impact in that way what they are consuming as well. Some potential benefits of being pasture raised, assuming that the animal is largely on pasture, is that similar to grass-fed, it has a more beneficial fatty acid profile. So again, higher in omega-3s. It has higher something called CLA, which stands for conjugated linoleic acid, which is another beneficial fatty acid. And also it just results, again, in happier cows, a better lifestyle, better well-being for the cows. They're going to produce therefore better milk. Another benefit that you might want to consider is the environmental impact of pasture-raised cows. So if cows are on pasture, then wherever they are is going to receive the benefit of things like manure for a nutrient source. And also if they're located near bodies of water, then it can help to reduce the effects of overgrowth of algae and other plants due to things like excess nitrogen in the water. These practices can also reduce ammonia emissions, and they can contribute to the overall soil health over time. And in general, it's a more sustainable practice. Let's move on to our third label, which is organic. And in this case, organic refers to more of the production methods used. In order to pass the USDA requirements for organic when it pertains to milk, it seems pretty rigorous. So it means that you can't use things like synthetic pesticides or GMOs or antibiotics or hormones. Now you might think, oh, well, if it has to pass all those things, then the cows must be grass-fed, right? Well, no, it actually doesn't cover that. It does stipulate that the cows have to be on pasture at least 120 days per year. Unlike where it actually says pasture raised and there's no specific requirement, this does have that. However, it can be supplemented with other things besides grass. Because it does employ the pasture raising method, there are obviously environmental benefits, and also you are reducing your exposure to chemicals. So that is another benefit as well. Now, just to make things a little more complicated, there is the label you might have seen, certified humane. I think it's like blue font with like a white background. You might see that sticker on milk as well. And that just means that the producer adheres to higher standards of animal welfare. When comparing the three, there's four major categories. So there's the nutritional profile, there's the welfare of the animals, there's the environmental impact, and finally, but very important, is the cost. So obviously, the higher quality food and the more expensive it is to raise the cows and keep them alive and healthy and happy, the more expensive the milk is going to be in order for the producers to maintain a profit. That might help you if I do a brief summary, because I know we covered a lot. Grass-fed. So grass-fed means that it does eat quite a bit of grass. However, it doesn't mean it's exclusively grass-fed. It still can be supplemented unless you look for the label from the AGA, which specifies that it's 100% grass-fed. Benefits can include having a higher nutritional profile. Pasture raised. Pasture raised means that you have some generally pretty healthy and happy cows if they truly are spending a lot of time on pasture. There is no set standard, so that doesn't mean it has to spend a certain amount of hours on pasture, but it's also going to have a higher nutritional profile if it is eating a lot of grass because it's out in the field. Finally, organic. Organic means that it does have to spend at least 120 hours on pasture, and it refers more to how the milk is produced as opposed to the type of feed that the cow is given. Again, spending a lot of time on pasture, naturally it is going to eat some more grass. And there cannot be things used like synthetic pesticides, GMOs, hormones, and antibiotics. As far as which choice is best for you and your family, that is going to completely depend on what you prioritize. Again, like most things, there's not an answer, a one-size-fits-all approach to this. So do you prioritize nutrition? Do you prioritize the environment? Do you prioritize animal welfare? And even if you might say, for example, like, hey, yeah, it does matter to me how the cows are treated, but I only have it in my budget to afford milk that isn't necessarily guaranteed the welfare of the animal, again, that's, a decision that you're going to have to make as well. So cost is definitely a big factor. That's why, as always, I encourage you to do your own research and make the choice that is best for you. I'd really like to hear from you, especially people that have worked in the industry, or you're like a hobby farmer, I guess, is that the right term? But someone who's just like had a cow, you've had dairy, and so that way you have a better perspective than most of us. If I'm wrong on any of these points or you have something to contribute, please feel free to add that to the conversation because we could use your perspective. I hope this video has helped you break things down a little bit, saved you some time, because a lot of us are very busy and don't have time to do a lot of in-depth research into this, but you want to make the best informed choice for yourself and your family. So I hope this has done that for you. Please, if you liked the video, please like it and share it with friends, and I will see you all again soon.